Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the 2022 Tennessee RiverLine Virtual Summit. My name is Brad Collett, and I'm the director of the Tennessee RiverLine Initiative and an associate professor here at the University of Tennessee Department of Plant Sciences and School of Landscape Architecture. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody this afternoon. Hope everybody had a good lunch and has enjoyed the sessions and the summit so far. It's been a great day of conversations around priority initiatives within the Tennessee RiverLine so far. I'd like to take a moment just to recognize our principal partners, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville and the Tennessee Valley Authority. It's through their leadership, vision, and investments that we're able to offer the Tennessee RiverLine Summits, as well as the Tennessee RiverLine Initiative most broadly. Their efforts in collaboration with the Tennessee RiverLine Partnership are for all who seek to experience the Tennessee River for generations to come. Before we begin our session, just a couple of additional reminders that if you have questions for our speaker this afternoon, please add your questions and comments to the question and answer feature in the summit website. We will answer those questions as they come in. Additionally, this summit session is being recorded for future reference by both you and others who have registered for the summit. Additional resources are available for select summit sessions on the summit website as well. And if you have any technology issues, please feel free to reach out to Dustin Toothman, who will try to help you work through them. His email address is dustin@tnriverline.org. We're here today, this afternoon, to talk about a hero's journey, reflections on a 652-mile paddle on the Tennessee RiverLine. And as we think about the word heroes in our lives, a lot of different individuals come up, our veterans and service members, our first responders, our frontline healthcare workers. Within the language of the Tennessee RiverLine, a hero is an individual who travels the entire 652 miles of the Tennessee River in one continuous trip. Now, over history, that has happened multiple times. Books have been written about these experiences, but earlier in 2021, for the first time since the Tennessee RiverLine Initiative and the Tennessee RiverLine Vision was made public in 2019, we had our first heroes complete their journey on the Tennessee RiverLine. That journey was completed by Jeff and Jon Wunrow, who are cousins, and who we had the pleasure of connecting with during and obviously in follow-up to their journey. It was really exciting to receive correspondence from Jeff leading up to their trip. And it was also inspiring to meet Jeff and Jon during their paddle, as well as to follow their experience as they went and as they shared it in their blog. One of the things that was really interesting, that it was offering so many great learning opportunities for our team, as well as for communities along the Tennessee River, in terms of what their experience was like and how we can optimize that experience and enhance that experience moving forward. It was truly a joy to be in Paducah, Kentucky, to welcome them as they completed their trip. I convinced my son to hop in the car with me, and we drove across the state. It's funny, Jeff and I were texting along the way because they didn't know that we were going to be there, and I kept on encouraging him to take it easy, to take it slow. I didn't want to spoil the surprise, but we happened to get there about a half hour before they showed up at the landing. With Julie Harris and some other members of the local leadership team. It was truly a pleasure to be a part, to play some small part in that trip. So we've asked Jeff to join us here today as a part of the summit to share additional insights into his experiences and the lessons that we all can learn from a hero's journey on the Tennessee RiverLine. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jeff Wunrow.
Thank you, Brad. It's really an honor to be presenting to you guys today. I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about being referred to as a hero, just because it was just what John and I do. And we were really proud of the fact that we were able to share our experiences with Brad and some of the communities that were the early adopters to the Riverline. And so we really, really appreciated all of that. Getting back to Brad and his surprise welcoming for us in Paducah, we probably would have gotten there 2 or 3 hours prior to when we arrived, but we had this ongoing text exchange. He was like, go slower, stop and have lunch or whatever, and it was one of those things where we really wanted to honor what he was trying to do. But at the same time, when you're in that last day of a trip like that, you've been looking at Paducah for 35 days, and it was kind of that slow roll was interesting to do. So what I'm going to try to cover for you guys today is I'll spend a little bit of time about John and I and what our paddling history is, and I would try to share some of the experiences we had in the communities along the way. Call it best in class, but I at the end of the day, every part of the experience was awesome. So there's no worst in class, but we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about some of the experiences we had in the communities and how we can learn from that, and then kind of roll those into what makes the Riverline great, and also where can we go from here. So I started kayaking about almost 20 years ago, early in the 2000s, mostly in Minnesota where I lived. Started off with a little tiny 10-foot Pelican that I got at Walmart for $200. And that little boat took me everywhere I wanted to go. So it was really I really fell in love with kayaking at that point. I spent a lot of time on the lakes around Minneapolis, Lake Minnetonka, which is the lake that I lived on. I did a circumnavigation of that lake's 122 miles of shoreline. And my paddling season would start as soon as a little bit of the ice had melted and there was open water, and it would end basically when the lake froze over. So you can see in that middle picture there, that was probably a week before the ice completely froze over the lake. So I really had loved paddling on that lake. John and I are cousins, our dads are brothers, and we spent quite a bit of time together when we were in our 10, 11, 12. He lived in Western New York. I lived in Milwaukee. So we didn't see each other that much, but we hung out probably over the summers for a couple of days each summer. And then from probably age 12, we hadn't seen each other until we met in Lake Itasca, Minnesota, to start the Mississippi River trip. So it was kind of an interesting dynamic where we had known each other our whole lives, but really hadn't really spent any time together as adults. So there was a lot of phone calls in our pre-planning of, trying to feel each other out as far as, are we going to get along? Do we have enough in common? And John is a very experienced adventure outdoorist. He's hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. He's climbed Denali. He's climbed the highest mountain in Canada. He's climbed all but 2 of the highest mountains in South America. And he's very experienced. So all of the concern, I think, was on his side, because he didn't know what my kind of qualifications were. So I remember one time on a call, we spent about an hour, and he would kind of be throwing questions at me, and at the end of that call, he said, "So do you have any questions for me?" I said, "Well, are you okay if we bring whiskey on this trip?" And so he was like, "Well, yeah, I guess I'm okay with that." And I said, "That's the only concern I had. So let's do it." So, so you can see up on the photos on the top there, that marker is the beginning of the Mississippi River at Lake Itasca. At that point, the mighty Mississippi is about 10 feet wide and about 8 inches deep. So you can literally walk across it and not get your knees wet. Picture in the middle is paddling through St. Louis, which happens to be where our next trip is going to end, and that is the Missouri River. We're planning on doing that, and we were planning on doing that in 22. And then the picture on the upper right is me paddling into the Gulf of Mexico, just off of the Louisiana coast. So again, we were going to do the Missouri River today, or this year. Then in November, I suffered a massive stroke, and that kind of turned my world sideways a bit. I had just had knee replacement surgery, and apparently a blood clot formed in my leg after I had this knee surgery. I was home for 3 hours and I had the stroke, and then I was back in the hospital for another month. So kind of a really sobering setback for me. But the good news is that I got home on Thanksgiving morning, got to spend Thanksgiving with my family. And instead of trying to figure out how to do the Missouri in 22, I have to work on all the rewiring of my brain to my left side. So the part of the brain that was damaged controlled the speech and actually most of the fine motor skills on my left hand. So they promised me that if I continue doing my rehab, which I do every day, that I should regain all of that functionality sometime in late 22. So my goal for this year is to get in my kayak again on May 1st. If I can do it sooner, I will do it. And then we're to try to do at least a multi-day or two or three night overnight kayak trip in maybe September and October, assuming, of course, I have a partially functioning right hand or left hand. But that's kind of the goal of for this year and following. So going back to the actual trip, one of the things that we experienced on the Mississippi, the entire time you're on the river in Minnesota, the state of Minnesota has designated the Mississippi River a state water trail, not unlike what we're trying to do with the Tennessee. So it's about a 375-mile stretch of the river as it runs through Minnesota, and they have designated campsites at probably 10 to 15 mile increments along the entirety of the river in Minnesota. And they have a really nice set of maps that show you where the portages are and where the campsites are. So I think one of the resources that you guys should be looking at is that Minnesota Water Trails website, because there's a lot of good stuff in there, and I'll get to that when I talk about, you know, our experience and next steps for making the RiverLine a world-class destination for adventurers all over the world. At about day 4 of the trip, we had been kind of playing phone tag with Brad for we became aware of Brad on the day we launched. I'm not sure how he found out about us, and he texted me, and we were texting back and forth for a couple of days, and he was trying to see if there was a way that we could connect while we were still in the Knoxville area, and it never really worked out, but that's not a problem. So we paddled into Kingston, Tennessee, knowing that we needed to get to a hotel. We had some laundry to do. We had some resupplying that we needed to do. And we knew that there's a thunderstorm coming, and we don't like to be on the water when there's lightning, because that's just waiting for an accident. So we pulled into the boat ramp in Kingston, knowing that there were hotels. We always do at night before we go to bed. We spend about an hour poring over the maps and scouring Google Earth, looking at the stretch of the river that we're going to be traveling, identifying where the boat ramps are, in case we wanted to get out of our boats and have a bite to eat, and looking for cities and towns along the river, and specifically looking at places that have hotels and restaurants. So we knew all of that was in Kingston. We knew that the hotels we were looking at were a couple of miles away from the boat landing. So we knew we were going to have to find a place to store our boats that was secure. And in landing, we didn't see any place, but we noticed a church that was down the road, and we kind of thought maybe we could knock on the pastor's door and see if we could accommodate storing our boats. And if any of you have had the opportunity to watch the YouTube video that Brad posted on the website of our trip, you'll see that in that video, John was wearing a green hat, and the decal on his hat said, "Do epic shit." And so I laughingly told John that before we go in to talk to the pastor, you might want to change out your hat. So before we got a chance to walk over to the church, I walked into the restroom that is adjacent to the landing, and I had my life jacket on, and I met a gentleman named Sonny who worked for the Parks Department in Kingston. And I told him what we were doing, and he's got really excited. He said, "Are you guys doing the 652?" And I was like, I don't know what that is. I can tell you we're paddling from Knoxville to Paducah. He said, yeah, that's 652. So I'm like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. And I said, do you know if there's somebody we can talk to maybe store our boats in that floating dock there? And he's like, oh, I have the combo. He's like, just let me talk to my boss, Chase. And immediately Chase is on the phone, and he's totally blessing the idea. So we haul our boats over and get them secured on the ramp. Chase meets us in a pickup truck and loads all of our gear in it, and says he's going to take us to the hotel. And all of a sudden, we're pulling into an office complex, and I'm like, "This isn't the hotel." He's like, "No, there's somebody I want you to meet." And so he pulls us into the city controller's office, David Bowling. And so we spend an hour talking to David and Chase about paddling and all and our adventures, and then eventually end up having dinner with David and a couple of the folks from the city. And Brad made the drive all the way from Knoxville to Kingston and presented us with t-shirts and water bottles. So that was really cool. The next really great experience was on day 10 of the trip. I have to state that first 10 days on the river was unexpectedly cold. We had lows in the 30s and even high 20s, and we had summer weight sleeping bags because we didn't think it was going to be that cold. And we were just freezing every night. I mean, wearing every stitch of clothes we had. And so when we knew we were going through Chattanooga, we started doing the research on, are there places where, maybe there as a sporting goods store, we could upgrade our sleeping bags. So coming into Chattanooga, we noticed that there was let's see, it was a Spring Hill Suites hotel right on the river. And so we called ahead, my cousin John called ahead and talked to the hotel manager of Victoria Grace, explained what we were doing. And she said, oh, we have a conference room that's not being used because of COVID. Nobody's having conferences. You're welcome to store your boats in our conference room. So the picture here is all of our gear in their conference room. So we never had a more comfortable place to unload our boats and get our gear organized and then pack up the next morning, you know, not worrying about wind and rain and all that stuff. I mean, it was got all of our gear and then just wheeled our boats right through the lobby. I mean, the looks we had from the customers in the hotel was really priceless. We did get to upgrade our sleeping bags at a local outfitter who was gracious enough to send our old bags home, so we didn't have to haul those things around. And they had great Uber use access, so we were able to get a resupply, and you know, it really checked all the boxes that we were looking for that day. And it was a completely just random, you know, it wasn't one of those River Angel experiences that we had that Brad helped to orchestrate. It just because was an organic example of people helping out people. Scottsboro, we kind of get in there. It was, you know, it was like two weeks on the river. We were a little tired, and we knew there was a days of worth of really heavy lightning following the day that we pulled in. So we knew we wanted to get a hotel. Again, all of our research showed that there were hotels, but they were 2 or 3 miles away from the boat ramps. So we pulled into the boat ramps, thinking, because we had seen that there was a tavern across the road from the boat ramp, but it was a pretty busy divided highway, so we didn't think we were going to be able to get our boats over there. Brad had given me the name of Mila Sachs, and she said she's not really part of Scottsboro, but she promised she would make a call. She connected us with Sarah Stahl and her husband Daniel, who just dropped everything, brought 2 SUVs to the boat landing, loaded our boats, and she made a call to in Johnson County Park. The county has built these beautiful cabins that are for rent, and so they provided a cabin for us to stay in and dropped our boats off and our gear off so we could get it all dried. And the campground was beautiful. I would say little barbecue place right not even a quarter mile walk from the house. And I think it would be a really great place to land if you were paddling the Tennessee. Unfortunately, it's in a little back bay that's not off the main channel. So it'd be probably a 2 or 3 mile at least kind of detour in a boat. So when you're paddling and you're toward the end of the day, that distance could be something that made you not want to do it. So, but all the infrastructure in Scottsboro is there. So if there's just a way that there's maybe a shuttle service that you know it could be volunteer run or something like that, would be a really great destination for people paddling through there. Now you're about maybe less or 2/3 of the way here when we are on day 18 paddling into Decatur. We knew there was hotels near the river, and we paddled in, and we had been connected by Brad to Danielle Gibson from the Office of Tourism, and she helped us get into the Home 2 Suites hotel. the manager there was also more than eager to let us store our boats in their conference room. Unfortunately, the hallways were so narrow and the turns were so tight, we couldn't get our boats in the building. So luckily they had a nice covered patio off the back of the hotel where we were able to store our boats and lock them to the building. So that was really a nice. We had a nice coffee exchange with Danielle, and she asked us about our trip and kind of learned about us. And then she introduced us to a local kayaker named Dan Pruitt. And she said that Dan wanted to take us out to dinner. So we met Dan at the hotel, and he drove us to a nice Italian place, and we just had a blast. I mean, Dan is just we sat and probably for 2 or 3 hours talked about paddling with Dan, all the places he'd paddled, and we really had a blast. And then he took us on a grocery run, which was awesome. So we had a great time there, and he actually came back to the hotel the next morning. I didn't even know he was going to be there, and offered to haul all of our gear back to the boat landing. We had the previous day we had put our portage wheels on and wheeled our boats over to the hotel, which is a half a mile, and dragging a 200-pound boat on wheels takes a little bit of time. So it was really great to have him get us there and then set us on our way. So that was really and I'm still friends on Instagram with Dan. He's a pretty prolific Instagrammer, and he's got a really good paddling YouTube channel called Southern Paddler. Just a great guy, and he's somebody that I keep teasing. I'm like, we're going to do a trip to you and I, because he hadn't had any overnight paddling experience. So hopefully I can help him to get to that stage. Coming into Pickwick was now we were maybe a little 10 days from the end. And it's a big dam, and it's notoriously known for a lot of barge traffic, which ties up the lock. So we were trying to figure out if there was a way that we could maybe get somebody that would give us a lift around the lock in case there was a backup. So Brad had put us in touch with Beth Pippins, who is the tourism director for Pickwick Landing. And she connected us with a local guy that could haul our boats that next morning, and set us up at the Pickwick Dam Lodge, which is on the state park site. And just a really nice, I think it's really made for conferences. Of course, with COVID, there wasn't a lot of that going on. So we had all the room we wanted to spread out. So it was really nice. And then Beth took us to a little barbecue place, the Pickwick Outpost. And we had a nice dinner meeting with her and got on the river the next morning. So again, another community that was really already in the earliest stages of kind of embracing the riverline and the through paddler. So we really appreciated all of the help that those communities provided us. Now, once you get into what our look at what was really working great already on the riverline, I will tell you the most, and the guys, the Trail of Tears guys hit on it yesterday. I mean, I put actually people #1 on the experience list of this trip. And I would say when we did the Mississippi, it was the same thing. So the people you meet, I mean, Beth was awesome, Brad was awesome, but all the people you just meet organically through a trip like this, because you pull into a community with a couple of kayaks and people are curious. They are drawn to you and they want to talk to you. And we realized on the Mississippi that just like those people are becoming a part of our story, those people approaching us, we become a part of their story. So they'll be telling their friends, you should have seen, we ran into these crazy kayakers that were paddling the Tennessee River, blah, 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 you know, all that kind of stuff. So the people, amazing. We actually, I would say, I mean, the people that would just see us walking to a grocery store from the boat ramp and just pull up and say hi and ask us what we were doing and offer us a ride. I mean, that happened all the time. We were at a boat landing about day 12, and we were at a boat landing that had a really nice little TVA strip of land where we could camp. And my cousin was going to do a 3-mile walk into town to get some Subway sandwiches. And an old timer in a pickup truck that had a little dog pulled up next to him and was talking to him and said, I never pick up strangers, but I saw you guys pull in with your boats, and I just want to know what's going on. And so John hopped in the truck, and they got dinner. And so the little dog was a little Papillon named Sadie. And George said, I've never been a dog person. I never wanted a dog. And I was at the county fair, and they had a little pen with these little dogs. And he says, I think I'm going to grab, I think I need it. The person that was with him kind of talked him into getting a dog. And they're like, what one you want? And he said, I put my finger in the middle of that pen, and Sadie was the only one that came up to me, and she licked my finger, and we've been best friends ever since. So, I mean, those kind of stories, you get them all the time on the river. So really beautiful. I think aside from the people, the history, I mean, I knew that Tennessee, and just having been a newly adopted Tennessean, my wife and I moved to Tennessee in June of 20. So really kind of getting my feet under me. So, but I am a history buff, and have just been immersing myself in Tennessee history and some of the stuff that we were, you know, so I didn't have any idea. I mean, I had heard of the Trail of Tears, but I didn't really, there was not a connection for me. I grew up in Wisconsin. It was happened in the South, which is a long ways away when you're 8 or 9 years old. So, but the kind of the touch points that we had on the river with the Trail of Tears was really fascinating, and I'm continuing to do more research and educating myself on the Trail of Tears. And hearing the guys yesterday was really very inspirational. I always knew that the TVA was the association that helped bring electricity to rural Tennessee. But paddling the river, we had at least a couple of occasions where we met people whose family ties led to life before the TVA, and got to learn about their story and what their livelihood was, and how the damming of the river changed their life. So, I mean, that's, you always associate things like, oh, that electricity forever, that's really good. But, talking to people whose father had built a prosperous business on the riverbank, and all of that is 60 feet or 80 feet underwater right now. I mean, it just brought all of that. It made it a lot more personal for me. And I really appreciated the opportunity to meet people that could bridge that part of history for me. I knew that Alabama had a rich history in space flight, but I wasn't prepared for the rocket ship that transports all the rocket bodies, both ready to launch and spent rocket bodies, back to the complex in Alabama to be refurbished and rebuilt. So funny, we actually paddled past the rocket ship on the Mississippi. We were, I think, going through Arkansas. And so we saw this giant boat and didn't have any idea what it was. And I saw that it was called the rocket ship. And I went, what the hell is that? So I did some Googling and learned more about it. But to actually paddle past the dock that ship is now moored at on the Tennessee was really cool. Of course, all of the river, the steam river history of river travel in general in the 1800s, whether it's the Mississippi or the Tennessee, there's that evidence all along the Tennessee, which is really fun. And then I had no idea. I hadn't heard of Muscle Shoals, but I didn't really I thought it was like a geographic place. I didn't realize it was a town or a place where people lived. And we were getting a ride around one of the dams that was closed, or the locks were closed. The guy that gave us the ride was telling us all about Muscle Shoals and all the bands, the famous bands from the 60s and all of that had recorded there. Was like, I got to learn more about this. And kind of in a kind of a so what on these last two paces, the River Angels and the history. All of these are places that I plan to come back to with family and friends and explore more. So the positive experiences we had while paddling the river are going to lead us to come back and introduce other people to those communities. And that said, the carry-on kind of tourism bang for the buck that goes above and beyond just what the paddlers are going to spend while they're on the river. I think we have the opportunity to really open up people's eyes from around the world and around the country into the beauty and the history and the people of Middle Tennessee and the South. So I think it's really a great opportunity, and you can't beat the scenery on the Tennessee River. I mean, it's really breathtaking. I was not prepared for the extreme, the limestone and all of that coming right to the river's edge. I mean, it's just breathtaking. I loved all of the scenery. I mean, if you get a chance to watch my YouTube video, there's a lot more photography on there. So I think, all of these images kind of speak for themselves. This was the second last night. It was our kind of the end of our struggle on Kentucky Lake, where we had 30-mile-an-hour headwinds the entire 75 miles of it. So, but this little gravelly beach was just a little gem in our campsite. You can see me on my iPad blogging away. Yeah, I have so many great memories of camping on this river. So present and future. So I think one of the things we looked at is, was there any awareness of people that were doing the river? So obviously in a couple of those, like Kingston and Decatur, there were people that knew what the 652 was. Most of the people that we ran into didn't know it, but that's okay. I mean, as all of the communities come online this year, I think that awareness is going to build. River Angels are anybody that just kind of becomes a part of your trip and becomes a woven into your story. And we had amazing river angel experiences on this river. And whether or not, it's the way that we want the river to be, the river line to be, even as it stands right now, the experience is awesome. I mean, if you're an experienced paddler, it's a totally doable trip, and it's not, as long as you know how to think for yourself and think on your feet, it's an amazing trip. So camping, I think, was probably the number one thing we were always kind of looking for. And there's parts where it was a no-brainer where we could camp, but Brand introduced us to a hunting app called OnX that shows who owns all the property adjacent to the river. So as long as a strip of property is owned by the TVA, we could camp there. So we use that app religiously. One of the things that we thought to improve the experience was the concept of a transient camping opportunities. There were a couple communities on the Mississippi that did this. Wabasha, which is the home of the Grumpy Old Man movie, has transient camping just a block away from the river. So even if you have a little community park that's on the riverbank, maybe there's a little side area that the locals will allow people that are paddling to camp in. And then from a support perspective, I think that right now we're into this with local police and also state park rangers, where they don't necessarily embrace that somebody might be, spending the night camping in their town. They see that as kind of a questionable thing. Whereas in Minnesota, on the river, on a river trail, it's like if you arrive at a Minnesota state park and you are human powered, even if the park is sold out, they will find a place for you to camp. So I think if we can get that kind of a mindset in the communities and in the state parks, I think that would go a long ways towards taking us to that next step from a camping point. Also, if there was just a contact point or a website portal or something that would help people get questions answered, whether they're doing research on their trip or on the trip and just trying to figure out where they can get repo supply. So having that kind of a point of contact would be great. I think there's an opportunity for more river signage that would kind of identify whether there were boat ramps or marinas that we know that there's a safe place for us to stay. And then all of that can wrap up into kind of that next gen mobile app experience that I think, if it's location aware and has kind of that OnX type mapping that allows you to see where it's safe to camp, those are really the core parts of what we need to know. If we could show where there's drinking water available, or communities where maybe they have a ride share available, whether it's Uber, or in a small town, maybe they have a group of volunteers that can be on call to haul a paddler to a place if they need a ride. So we realize that we were blessed with celebrity status on this trip, and that's going to be that'll be hard to duplicate for everybody that's on a through paddle, but I think that's the goal, right? I mean, how do we build the infrastructure out so that people can start the trip and finish it and just have it be a trip of a lifetime that they tell all of their friends about and encourage others to paddle. And I wanted to close with one thing that kind of was the result of my stroke. It took me about 2 weeks to kind of in my recovery before I had words where I could actually ask my wife what was going on when I was having an active stroke. And what I learned is what it all came down to is it was either right as I was having the stroke, or I had a stroke induced violent seizure where they had to put a breathing tube through my throat, and I had a vision where my mom and I were in a little cafe sitting and drinking coffee, and she looked as beautiful as she always looked. And now she died in 2003. And we chatted for a little bit, and she grabbed my hand and she looked me in the eye and she said, you know, Jeff, you are on the verge of getting a tremendous blessing in your life. You're going to recover from this stroke, and you're going to be able to be a positive influence on other people's lives. And I challenge you to take your passion for paddling and use it to promote awareness of stroke, and promote and encourage stroke survivors to not give up, and use paddling as a metaphor to encourage people to find a passion in their life to live for, and to give them the motivation to do all of the frustrating and painful rehab that comes with that. So I have dedicated my life and paddling career to promoting stroke awareness and helping other people that are battling through the recovery to keep their will alive and battle through it. So and Brad has been gracious to enough to see if there's a way that we can tie the communities in the Riverline that already have the seated kayaks in their possession, that could be another way that we promote people that are post-stroke that are looking for an active lifestyle to explore Tennessee on the water. So that's what I've got here. So I really appreciate you paddling with us. I encourage you to visit my website. There is a section on the Mississippi and the Tennessee rivers with float plan, photo albums, and all the resources we use to pull this together. So thank you for your attention to. So I'll stop sharing, and then we can do any quick QA that you might have.
Jeff, that was that was amazing. I wasn't quite sure if I was gonna be able to turn on my camera as I was drying my eyes. That's a powerful story, and we really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think that's what's really powerful about what you've just shared is understanding that there's a great foundation already in place, but that there's also great opportunity in ways that we can all continue to work together to welcome generations of paddlers like you to our area, and to tell the stories that our landscape, our communities, our region has to tell. And we heard that resoundingly yesterday with Ian and Jamie, who were drawn from around the world, and others right here in the United States would be compelled to do the same. One thing that we talked about on our calls, you had also mentioned the kind of scale of the Riverline as an approachable experience. Can you elaborate a little bit
so
on that?
if you think about the Mississippi, that's a 100-day commitment, right? Or if you look at the Appalachian Trail, it's a 100-day commitment, and they're amazing experiences. But the Tennessee has all of it's like you took the Mississippi and just condensed it down into a third of the distance, but kept all of the amazing opportunities for history and people and all of that stuff. I mean, I think once people can get a month off. People getting a year off or 6 months off, that's a whole different kettle of fish, right? So it's very accessible, and what you can accomplish and get, you know, the experience you can get in your heart in 35 days is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. That's really great perspective to hear, and also the perspective that you shared about how, and you know, I think that in our conversations with John, he was maybe even offering a shorter kind of distance, but you were saying 2 to 3 miles off of the river, like that's just not accessible to someone who's coming in on a
right.
So it's just really interesting to hear the ways that you kind of were able to navigate that space now, but also again thinking into the future, what are opportunities for River Angels or entrepreneurs to fill that gap as well.
Yeah, and you know, people are looking to help, right? I think if the call went out for, you know, kind of like the Dan Pruitt of the world, right, in Decatur, right? There's probably somebody like that in every community that would be like, you know what, if somebody needs a ride and I'm available, I'm happy to drop what I'm doing and give them a ride. Or, you know, I mean, I'm sure that that network of caring people is out there already. They just don't know it exists right now.
Sure. I'm panning through the chat, and I hope that you'll have a chance to look at this as well. Not a lot of questions, but a lot of thank yous, and really appreciate you sharing your story. Beth Pippin says hello. Blair Travis from Calvert City, who helped you around the dam there as well, said to say hello. Such a great story, and some branding ideas also for your stroke survivor initiative too. So I'm sincere on behalf of our partnership, on behalf of our team, to lean in any way that we can to help support, get that idea off of the grounds in our communities and around the region as well. So we just appreciate you so much and telling the story, and we're glad that we have this now on recorded, and we can share it with other folks and who can hear the great testimony that you've provided to what is there to celebrate and what is there for us as an opportunity as well.
Right.
Just incredibly valuable. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate you stepping forward and agreeing to be on our technical advisory group. So we'll be picking your brain about these and related matters into the future as well. So thank you so much for that. We know that you won't be a stranger to our group, and we look forward to engaging with you again in the future.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the attention today.
Yeah, and thank you all for sharing your time here this afternoon to watch and to listen to Jeff's story. And we hope that you'll help us continue to welcome folks like Jeff and to tell his story and the stories that our visitors have to tell as well moving forward. So thank you all for attending. We'll wrap up here and we'll move on to our next session. Thank you so much.